Good evening, everyone. It's Tom Sidney Bushnell, aka Numbers, here from Psych.Club from the Tom Numbers Show. News with Tom Numbers, the top of your game, and I've got, for the third time, we're lucky to have SHEILA. SHEILA's back. SHEILA home. How are you, SHEILA?
It's good to be with you. Doing great. Doing great. There's a lot of progress. You're noticing everything's in a flood stage right now. We were in drip, 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 and oh my goodness, every day there's a big flood.
Yes, it's coming. The storm is coming. We had a storm last night here, just out of nowhere. It was a warm day, and then the storm came, and then it went. So, yeah. So, what have you? Well, I know there's some things you wanted to discuss today, but one of the questions that has been one of the things that got pointed out to me was our first show. We talked about the eclipse over America, and someone was in the notes or the comments was saying that 40 days after the 8th was Passover, if that was correct, if what they were saying was correct, and they thought there might be something around that. But I was like, well, I'll be doing a show with SHEILA in a few days, so I'll ask her. Yeah.
Well, everything was spectacular, wasn't it? I mean, they said there was going to be a demon comet that was going to ruin land. That didn't happen. The Mississippi was going to split. Didn't happen. It was going to be all about Lucifer and Exodus and Egypt and rapture being in the lineage of the line instead of Nineveh. So everybody was trying to counter what God was revealing, and everything that He revealed is exactly what happened. And then we talked about the palindrome, I think, too, the 10 days. And those were the last 10 days of what's been happening. And so much has been happening. And that went the entire 8 days of Passover plus that was back forwards and backwards. So we went over that too. So everything about that is in numbers from April 20 to April 29. And then the Passover ended at sundown on 29 going into 30. And so there we go. I mean, we have lived one of the most miraculous times in all of history in watching all of this unfold.
Oh, so Passover finished on the 29th at midnight. Okay, of April. So what was the was there a 40-day window? Maybe they were talking. I thought they said Passover, but
That
they were
goes
saying
from Passover to Pentecost.
Pentecost. Okay.
To Pentecost. And when we come to Pentecost, I have all of them. If nobody has this Rose publication, it's fabulous because we don't live by the Hebrew calendar, but there's a Rose publication, and you can get this easily on the internet. It's the Feast of the Bible. And it gives you all the days for multiple years. The one that I just received last year goes out to the 26th. They just keep adding on, but you can compare it to previous years. And so Pentecost, June 2, that's what we're heading into. And April 15, no, I'm sorry, June 12, because April 25 was first, was unleavened bread 23 began Passover, and Passover went on that entire time of that was the invitation that night, and then
Your
as the night.
microphone, SHEILA, again is a little crackly. How's that?
Oh, April 23, which for Hebrew begins on sundown on the 22nd, is Passover going through to the 30th because it goes from the 23rd for 8 days, and so that's what's happening.
Can you hear me okay, SHEILA? We're getting that crackle again when you're talking. Just the last 30 seconds was kind of crackly.
I don't know. Maybe turn volume down a bit. Let me see here. Is this better? I turned volume down a little bit. Maybe that's
That's good. That's good so far. That's good so far, yeah.
okay. So yeah, everything for us starts on sundown the night before. So when people say Passover was 23rd, what you're talking about?
It's doing it again. I don't know why. I don't know why. Hopefully it comes out okay on the recording. Is that good?
I can hear you just fine. I don't know what it could be.
Yeah. Are you on a laptop or a microphone in front of you, or is it a phone? What is it?
So,
Laptop. Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe when you sit back at 2 or 3 inches, maybe that. Let's try there.
is that better?
Kind of. We'll carry on. If it gets bad again, I'll let you know.
Okay.
So Pentecost is 2nd of June, you say?
That's this year. So that begins at sundown on the 1st.
Okay.
Wait a minute. That we gotta make sure that it's the 24th. Because these all flow together. This is how the chart works. When you and it gives you out several years in advance when you purchase it. It's not, I don't think it's even $4. I think it's $3 or something. But
Quite
Pentecost in
crazy, Sheila.
24.
Are there any other browsers or software in the background on your laptop that might be interfering? Because I don't know what's going on.
Okay, close down so everything is that better.
Not really. No.
Hmm.
The demons are trying to stop us.
Everything is the same as it's always been, and I turned the volume down.
That's
But
okay. That's okay right now. That's all right now.
okay. Pentecost next year begins on the 2nd. This year it begins on the 12th. So that means it begins on the sundown on the 11th of June. Because our day begins at sundown the night before. So we're living our day from that sundown to the sundown of the date on the Gregorian calendar.
Okay. Okay.
Not better.
I don't know. Something's going on. It's like the picture's a little bit. If it was clear voice, it would be okay. But it's we'll carry on, and then if it gets, I don't know, we'll just keep going, see what happens.
We got to say here last time about the horses, and so many people wrote in about the horses, and let's tell us more about the horses. And the clues come from the people. You have wisdom that I don't have, and I have a little bit of wisdom that you haven't had. And so when we come together, we share that. But what's fascinating is in the comments when people are tracking with what we're talking about and they receive wisdom about something and they send it in. So I took a little poll and it matched with the experts. And what they said is when the black and the white horse bolted into traffic when Big Ben stopped, the black with the saddle means the ruler is dead, and the white with the blood meant massacre. Now, what's really fascinating, and you guys know more about this in England, people here didn't know that all three were announced to have cancer. First Charles, then Kate, then William. And many people, even in England, didn't know that I communicate with in Australia that William had been announced to have testicular cancer. So all three of those have cancer, and very, very strange for rulers to have cancer. It's us that gets cancer. So all of that will probably be explained someday. But where we're at right now is so unusual. Then here comes the black rider, horse with a saddle, no rider. And then the white horse being covered in blood, meaning massacre. Now, they've said forever it's going to be just like what they had done to the other families. And when they took over rulership of Russia, Russia was an all-believing nation, Christian nation. King Nicholas II of Russia and his entire family were taken captive. And then on the same night in July, all this happened in 1918. I think they were taken captive like February, maybe early March, but I think it was February of 1918. And a lot of this had to do with how people got drawn into World War I. So they took that family, and then on one night in July, the whole family was killed, a complete massacre. And so there's a lot of prayers about this for revealing exactly what's going on. But that's what that representation is of those horses. And the amazing thing is, after we discuss this, remember when Big Ben stopped at 9? It didn't start again till 10:06. And the Q post of 10:06 says, "We are under attack, no deals, Q." And right under it is UK. And so that combination, and it's starting at 10:06, but here's the other funny part. Big Ben rang chimed 11 times. So we had a 9 o'clock stop. And when it started again, it was an 11, but the timing was 10:06, and it matched exactly on the cue post of we're under attack, no deals, Q. And then it was UK. So there's a lot that's going on people don't understand, but still our focus has to be you and I. What can you and I do? What can you and I do to gain our rulership back? Because it's all about we the people. It's never been about the rulers. They flipped it on us and made it about the rulers, but they aren't in charge. They're not over us. They don't rule over us. All of that had changed, and then they flipped it back where there were rulers ruling absolutely everything. They wanted George Washington to become the king of America because they were so excited about him and becoming the president. And he said no, he wouldn't do it. He absolutely would not do it. He said we've come through all of this to form what's called a republic. And so Russia was republic. That's what United Soviet Socialist Republics is what it was, and USSR. So China was a republic. The state of California is a republic. It says it on the flag, but we never operated that way. And that's a very unusual form of government. And that's why when Benjamin Franklin was asked when he left the Constitutional Convention in America in 1787, they said, "What have you given us, sir?" And he said, "We've given you a republic if you can keep it." They knew how tough it would be. Will we, the people, really stand up and make sure that we're operating together for the sake of a better, good nation? And that's what we're supposed to be doing. So this is a very, very unusual time, and it's interesting that we're heading into this time, and then how all of this happened. And in Israel, they sacrificed the red heifer. When did they do that? The evening of April 22, which was the beginning of Pentecost. So they did a blood sacrifice. That blood sacrifice of Pentecost saved the people. And then that blood sacrifice was confirmed by the 10th sacrifice, which was Christ. So that completed it. And that's why there's very unusual things happening in the world right now. How did man pick a date for the sacrifice of the heifer? How did man pick a location for the rebuilding of the temple? Man got involved in all of this. So that's why we've been saying let's find out what the real truth is and exactly what we're supposed to do, because we're in uncharted territory. We're all operating in a place that we've never been before. In America, people don't know how to operate going forward because we've accepted that what they're telling us is what we're supposed to be thinking and doing. And now we're finding out that nothing that they're saying is what we're supposed to be thinking and doing. And it's like, well, how do we change? And so we're in a very unusual space, but I think it's a global space. Some nations have had this happening to them before it started happening in America, and they could see it happening in America. We've had a lot of immigrants come into America and immediately fight for this to stop. And we couldn't even see what needed to stop, because once you're in it, you don't see it as easily as someone who then becomes an immigrant from Russia or Poland or Romania, or somebody who's already been destroyed, or somebody, now we have so many from Venezuela and Somalia, and they're just from all these different nations, and they're like, you cannot let this continue. So, but the good news is we've had two huge military gatherings of all the military everywhere around the world, all the nations represented, because they've been cooperating together, because we have to stand together, because what's happened has happened everywhere. America just happens to be the country that is the focus now, but all the other nations have already experienced it. When I was in Australia in the 90s, they were experiencing going away from any checks or anything, going to complete digital. And now Americans are just starting to realize we're in that spot and we didn't even see it coming. Australia saw it coming, but gosh, what is that, like 30 years ago? They saw what was happening. So we're in a very, very unusual spot. And that's why that Big Ben experience was such a shock for us. And everything happening right at the crucial time of everybody trying to get to work, trying to get somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's a very, very busy time. So It's just a marvelous thing. And thank you so much for inviting me back because this has been very unusual in this time. And it's so wonderful to be able to compare this together and get all the beautiful comments from the people across the pond from us so that we can see because we're all in this together. This is not a new fight. It's not a new battle. It's just something Americans were not quite aware of or ready for.
Interesting. You talked about the Big Ben stopping at 9, starting again at 106, but chiming for 11. So when I heard the 9/11, obviously I think of 9/11. If you do a reversal on that, it's 11/9. 11/9's redemption. Mary Magdalene is 11/9. But also, the Republic is also 11/9. So when you're talking about, the Republic, I was like, okay. And I thought this before, but I'm wondering, you've made my mind think about it again. I wonder if we'll see a British Republic. British Republic is 171, a bolt of lightning, the revaluation. And English Republic is 175. That comes to Diana Francis Spencer 175. So I'm like, okay. A republic, an English republic. Could be possible. Might be what's on the card.
Is there much conversation in England about the fact that that family took over and changed everything that was planned in England? And this goes back many, many generations. So is that a conversation in England? It would be very interesting if the English people are starting to question, how did we end up here? How did we end up being structured like this? How did they take total control of us when we're supposed to be free on the land? Because all of the monarchies were phasing out. It was a togetherness working on the republic structure, which keeps all people free. So it'd be very interesting if in England people started saying, well, how do we regain our freedom on the land? How do we do it in England? If this has happened and there isn't one family controlling everything in England, Scotland, Ireland, if that has changed, how would the people proceed? It'd be a very interesting discussion to be having with people. I come from Scottish side, and many of them were what they call free thinkers because they didn't want to be controlled. And they were always having discussions like this. And so when they started that in America, it was very interesting to attend their meetings and just sit back and listen because they know generational things because they've been doing genealogy and what everybody was dealing with in prior times. So, and they've corrected all of this how many times in England? Um, remember King Richard? Um, a lot of the family in the history of my family, not my current relatives, but the ones that were in Scotland, they helped retain King Richard when they were trying to remove him. And he was a powerful for the people king. And so I don't know the lineages. I'm not a historian on England. I've been so engrossed in everything of what came to America, how it changed America, how we got at this point, so that we can understand, because the influences all came from Europe. And that was a discussion of all the presidents. That's what took out Monroe. Monroe had what's called the Monroe Doctrine. I hated all this stuff in school, but I never learned the truth about the Monroe Doctrine. Was this level of infiltration is bringing tyranny that we got escaped from, is bringing it into America. He wrote that in 1823. That was presented to Congress in 1823. So in 1826, they took out Jefferson and Adams. 1831, they took out Monroe. Why? Those guys were saying this is completely opposite of the Constitution to have a republic. They knew that it was eroding everything, and we weren't going to end up in a good spot. They knew it then, way before the Civil War. So and it'd be interesting to compare that with what was happening in England, what were people being told in order for all of this influence to come into America, because everything we're dealing with right now is global. It's not one nation or another nation. I mean, they're coming in multiples from Venezuela and Argentina because those countries have been destroyed. And now we're getting people from Chile and Colombia in greater numbers. And so it's like, what is happening? Because we haven't been able to get it turned around for the Americans yet. And so we live in a very, very interesting time, a very big global time of looking at how can we all have independence and peace in our countries. Very unusual time.
Yes, 1,000 years of peace is what we all want. When you pose the question, is there a conversation about that in England? There is I guess, in our circles and people, looking outside the box. It's not really on the mainstream per se. There's probably one or two, maybe sporadic. Maybe I don't watch the mainstream, but if it was anything really substantial, it might reach my desk. But it's not a huge conversation, but I think it's an underlying growing conversation amongst the populace. If they're seeing more and more things going on, they're asking, where's Kate? What's happening to Kate? And what's this Prince Charles painting all in red? There's all, so they are putting things out that are it's brewing. It's beginning to simmer. So yeah, it would be it'd be an interesting conversation, but it'd be a really interesting result, because I think the groundwork is being laid and has been. I think it's all percolating now. It's like, okay, we'll tell them a bit by bit. Like you said about the horses, says rulers down and etc. So it's like, okay, if that's the case, if Trump drained the swamp, if you believe him at his word, which I do, then it's like, okay, so what's all the rest of it? And it's like, okay, so what is the rest of it? Okay, so if everything's been done, what's the rest of it? Okay, so it's this narrative. It's playing out, and I can't wait till we get to the point where people realize, and the curtain goes up, and we're told is that everybody can be in agreement, because that's what you need. You need unity. You need unity of understanding, of consciousness, of people's hearts. But yeah, a republic, a British republic, that'll be an interesting thing. A global,
because it goes back to all the knights. It goes back to the Templars protecting the Queen. So what side were they on? And did they just want to conquer and destroy? Or because that's a whole mentality that was in the prior centuries of just conquer, destroy, take over. And all of the troops that were sent to North Africa, troops that were sent from forming the British Commonwealth. It's a very, very interesting conversation, because people don't realize what's in the Commonwealth. It's the biggest structure anywhere globally, and it's all under England, or it has all been under England. Is that going to change? It's just a very, very interesting time. What if all that changed? What if Australia and Canada weren't under the British crown anymore? What if, because people said, I'll tell you how funny it was for us. They said that our problem wasn't just Britain, it was France, it was all these battles. And King George III was over all of it. He was still over France back at that time. He was there. So we were fighting one huge military unit against us that was represented by the same royal line. And I never knew that the whole time growing up. They said we were battling England for this part of the country, and we were battling France for this part of the country. They were claiming it under the different structures of one king who was over all these nations. And so France had Louisiana, et cetera, et cetera. It still has affected it to this day. And it's just really interesting, because I never knew that till I did the research for the books. And in history, we just learned that England was one of the battles. We were also battling France. And it was one huge battle all over land, but all under one king. Like, having no idea it was all King George III. And when they were done with him, he was out, because arsenic was used as medicine and poison. And then that's what happened with all of them. He was out January 29, 1820. 26 was Jefferson Adams. 31 was Monroe. They were done on July 4, all three of those. So how to get those out, because where's the question going to be answered? Because everybody's like, no, 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 Sheila, this part of America was Britain, and this part of America was France, and that's how we were raised. That's what we were told is the truth about, and I hated history. I mean, trying to do an exam, prepare for an exam in history, civics was the same thing. I hated all of it. And now I find out why is because we never got to the root of anything. We were talking about all these surface conversations that didn't go anywhere, and there was never any resolution to anything, and no complete understanding. Everything just had some limbo parts in it. It just like stretched out parts. It just didn't make sense.
Yeah, history. He who writes it gets to tell his story, history. Yeah. But if you can change your frequency, 114, you can change your history, 114. You said about there's been 2 military gatherings. What were the 2 military gatherings you were referencing then, Sheila, earlier?
The first one was for 10 exact days from August 8 to 18 last year in 2023. And that's the first time all militaries of the whole world got together and did exercises together and learned how to work with each other.
Where was that? Where was that?
They had it going on all over the world. It was from August 8 to 18 of 23. They were all working with each other in different parts of the world. First time they'd ever joined forces.
So it wasn't like one physical place, it was all around at the same time.
Communicated with each other, because everything that we're dealing with right now, and that's what I was saying, Americans weren't aware that this was even going on. Did you know Americans don't even know that 1812 was still a battle for land with England? They still felt they owned the land, and the Native Americans helped fight for the land, and then they still pushed the Native Americans off their land. So the layers of this are much more fascinating than the stories and how we learned history, because it wasn't the truth. And so independence never really happened. They call 1776 the Independence Day on July 4, but that relates to something completely different. We were never independent then. We didn't even have a constitution till 1787. We didn't have the president in till 1789. And by 1791, they were doing centralized banks, which is against the Constitution. I mean, we've never had total republic structure, and that's the goal now, is because the republic form of government is you and I. And President Roosevelt was the one that said that the most. He says, come on, guys, the government is you and I. We have to work on this together. We have to figure this out together. It's us. It's not somebody way out there against us. It's us. It's us working on this. He says it again and again. I've shared his quotes in all my books. He kept repeating it. And that is what it was supposed to be, because that's what's different. And that's why Benjamin Franklin knew. He said, if you can keep it, is that it's almost impossible to do, because falling back into a monarch mentality. When you hear the comments over here, why didn't Trump just finish it out? Why didn't Trump complete it before the 4 years? Why doesn't Trump come back and finish the rest of it? He's not a dictator. He's not. If we, the people, don't stand up, then there is no republic. So you want somebody else to reform it. They pay the price. And then you just want to live in comfort like you're back in a monarch mentality. I did a whole chapter on this. I think it's in book 4, because that was back in 2019, because so much that we were trying to do, people were like, well, I don't know when someone's going to get that done. We're still hearing from people. I don't know. When is somebody going to do this? When is it? We're the somebody that has to bring this through. You don't have a republic structure unless the people are interactive and participating in it. Because otherwise, people who get in it are the ones who are structuring it, doing the deals about it. And we're finding things now that have been deals that they have done through the generations, because they're in forever. I believe it was in book 5 where I spoke about the Dingle family. And the Dingle family, the father of Dingle was in our Congress from 1933 to 1955, so 22 years. The son came in 55 when the dad passed, and he was in till 2015. So from 1955 to 2015, he ran it because he ran it from being the young son of the dingle who was in there before. In 2015, when he was having difficulty, then she's either the second or third wife, Debbie Dingle, then she takes over. And so she's been there since 2015. So I think that's somewhere around 92 years because we've got 22 and we've got 60 and we've got another 10 with her. And we're at like 92 years with that one family. And nobody wanted to understand in California when the Getty family took over. Pelosi's a Getty, Newsom's a Getty, the Browns were Gettys, all these people were Gettys. And so when one Getty goes out of that position, another one comes in, but those aren't the only Getty family members that are running everything in California and owning things in California that the people have put together. I'm working right now on a project with Wisconsin. The family has been running Wisconsin Assembly for the same amount of time. The people from the 30s have the next generation come in the 50s, identical to Dingle, and when they're controlling it, they're making all the deals, and the people are sitting out here working really hard, not knowing what happened. That's not a republic. That's letting other people run it, and then you get frustrated because they're running it, and it's not freedom and liberty for you on the land. And that's what's happened in all the nations. It's easier for them to come in and take over the nation because people want someone to take care of all of that stuff. And a republic is you and I. A republic is we the people in order to form a more perfect union. Exactly what you were talking about. Without that unity, without us insisting they operate in integrity, the money just disappears. The money just you just as well have a monarchy because you're never going to see the money again. You're never going to see it do anything again. And that's what's been happening. But we didn't realize this was happening to us. So after the military did the first one, so much was accomplished during that and working together that they did another one this year. So one was August of last year. The other one was just a few weeks ago this year. And they did the same thing again where they all worked together. And the video that came out was so powerful because the Russian flyers, which they said were at war in Ukraine, and the Americans were trying to take over, that was one of the joint exercises where the two planes were communicating with each other and taking instructions from each other. And you could hear the Russians were speaking in Russian. That's how much they're working together to get the communications between the pilots because we're up against a global structure that's been in place for many, many centuries. And now it came into America in the last 250 years. Well, I think we're at 248, but 250 years. And now it's happening here. So these global exercises, it's so exciting to realize that they're doing this because in that they know how to work together in any situation. But isn't it funny that the media picked it up and said the Americans are coming over and trying to help Ukraine and the whole message was stirred up.
So
And
that
you
was on
don't see
mainstream
them
media then.
talking war at all. I'm sorry.
That was on mainstream media then, the second exercise.
Yeah. They said that it was all about the war in Ukraine and they had that one clip about the Russians, but it was our bombers that were right there with them, but they're practicing together. And when you heard the Russians, they were speaking Russian. And our guys were able to communicate with them. So it was a powerful clip. It's only a few seconds, and a powerful clip. And it's really exciting to see what's happening because they're all working together.
You said a few minutes ago about 1776 and that it wasn't actually, 1776 as people may think. What was the reality of 1776 back then? What actually took place? What was it?
Well, they said that that was the day of Independence Day, July 4th, 1776. We were still in wars and battles in 1781. We were still in one of the hugest battles in 1812. The 1812 overture that's all I knew from band in high school. The 1812 overture is this masterful overture piece that bands and orchestras play. But the Native American Indians, it was especially the Creek Indians that were the highest population of any of the tribes north of Mexico at the time in 1812, were so upset because they won in 1812 to get the war back in America, but then the Americans were still pushing them. The Europeans who came in and took control of America by then were still pushing them out of their homes and off their land. And so then they continued in the battle. And that's where the phrase comes, the creek, God willing, and the creek don't rise. It's not the rising of a little stream, a creek. It's the Creek Indians. And they put on red war paint and carried red sticks. And they've been called Redskins ever since. And that whole thing is a lie. They're not red. They're darker in skin, but they're not red. There's no red skinned people anywhere in the world. But then they started doing all these TV shows about the Native Americans killing people in America. And what happened is they pushed them on the other side of the Mississippi. That was President Andrew Jackson's third goal. He had to get all the Native Americans out of their land along the East Coast on the other side of the Mississippi River, and he accomplished it. The Cherokee won the Supreme Court case. And after they won the Supreme Court case, Justice Marshall was told by President Andrew Jackson, since you want him to be here, you enforce it. But in our Constitution, the president has to enforce the Supreme Court stand. And so the Supreme Court, through Justice Marshall, said they're not going to be pushed out of their homes and off their land. And President Andrew Jackson said they're going across on the other side of the Mississippi. And when they did that, then what happened is the same people in the government did land rushes with other immigrants coming into America to give them the land that they had just given to the Native American Indians. And that's what caused the circling of the wagons. That's what caused all this in America. And they did TV shows making the Native American Indians wrong for everything, saying all they wanted to do was kill people. Imagine you go on a buffalo hunt, and you come back and somebody else is in your cabin. Somebody else is living on that land, using plows and digging up the land. Well, what's going on here? There was no communication about this. That's what Dances with Wolves was about. He provided the truth to them, did the diagrams for them. Remember the book that he had? And when he provided the truth to them and they wanted him to just continue going against the Native Americans and get them off the land, he left. And he went with them as they kept moving onto other land because they kept being pushed out of all the land they were given. So, because the Native American Indians in America, there were tribes everywhere in America and Canada. The First Peoples is what they call them in Canada. All of this was already positioned. All of this land was already theirs. And then all of this happened with the infiltration from Europe. So we haven't cleaned any of this up from the beginning.
It's like with the war, the Second World War, they thought it was over, and then they, went south, didn't they? So everything's a lie, isn't it? Really, everything's
everything.
Everything's a lie. Everything's been spun, respun, spun again, turned on its head.
Yes.
Yeah.
To sway the public in the direction you want them to be.
Yeah. Bread and circuses. Give them a little bit here, a little bit there, just enough so they don't revolt. And then
Napoleon's wife, let them eat cake.
Yeah,
they have no food. They have nothing. Let them eat cake, because you can make a cake out of almost anything. So let them eat cake.
Yeah.
Let them go into their pantries and put together whatever they can. Let them eat cake. Didn't care about what happened with the people.
Yeah.
King Ferdinand and his wife, they stole from the Jewish people. Then Columbus said he wasn't Jewish, and he was Jewish from Italy, and his name was Cologne, and he changed it to Columbus, and he got money from the crown to take and go to this new land of America, and he had an armada, and because he was Jewish, they delayed the trip a day because he knew that he would be in trouble under the Jewish structuring if he left on the day that he was ready to go. He delayed a day to leave the next day, and then the whole armada, he made money from them, leading them with him from taking money from the Jewish people in the other ships. and also from the King and Queen of Spain. So the whole thing, because these were all uninhabited lands at that time. And in 612 BC is when the tribes of Israel departed, and they went everywhere. People think my books mean that they all came to America. Well, America is just part of it, but they filled America because imagine they'd been here since the 600 time frame, 610 BC, and so being here that long, they had big families, and we did not know any of this timing. We didn't know where they were. We didn't know. We never questioned it. And that's why now when people want SHEILA HOLM to tell them her opinion on what happened and her opinion on where we are, it's really tough because man only knows what man knows. I only know the things that I know. You know a whole lot more than I know, Tom, because you know how to put all these things together. I've never learned all of that. But I know what I know, and the research has just been astounding. Just to realize the lies that we have been living in and perpetuating by just repeating them. We didn't do our own research. I remember people were so mad at Lynn Wood, and he said, do your own research, connect your own dots, make your own choices, because you have to know what you're deciding. You have to know what it's based upon. Because he noticed this where nobody knew why they were deciding the way they were deciding, why they were telling people to do what they were telling them to do. Everybody's been having like a soapbox to say things to people, and it doesn't mean anything. But I don't know if you guys ever experienced in Facebook, stop buying your gas at Mobil because Mobil's doing this. You need to buy it from Chevron. They have manipulated the market on everything because they get us to go out and say, oh, guys, we have to stop buying from Mobil. We have to buy from Chevron. And none of it's true. It's just what they want in the marketplace at that time. They have been pushing us all around like little widgets that don't have minds. It is unbelievable where we're at right
Mm. It is shocking, isn't it?
now. Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's the word shocking. That's what people need. They need a shock to wake them
Yes.
up. They need to be shocked, shocked awake, because otherwise it will continue. I
don't know what 7/4 of 1776 is, but that was never an Independence Day for us. And yet they did it to Jefferson and Adams on the 50th anniversary, 7/4 of 1826, and then the 55th, 7/4 of 1831. That's when they took out Jefferson and Adams on the 50th anniversary, Monroe on the 55th. So they chose to use 7/4 as a marker 50 years after they said we were independent. We've never been an independent nation. We've never been free of all this. We've always been under the crown.
But
And
Jefferson,
nobody
Adams,
wanted to hear that 10 years ago, but now they're starting to say, you know what? I think we've never been free. I said, you're right. We've never been free. We've never been independent.
yeah, Independence Day, non-independence. So Jefferson, Adams, and Monroe, they were, when you say taken out, they were assassinated. Or they were
Arsenic. Arsenic was
poisoned.
used as a medicine, and then just a small increase, and it becomes the poison that takes them out.
So they all
That's what
died
happened
on
to
4th
King
of
George
July.
III. I'm sorry.
They all died on the same day on 4th of July.
Jefferson and Adams on the 50th anniversary, 7/4 of 1826, and Monroe, 7/4 of 1831. And King George III, who was the architect of Georgia and America and Georgia and Russia, that King George III was taken out on January 29, 1820. And I don't know what these dates mean. I don't know why they were chosen. I don't know the history of King George. I remember asking God, which you said it was a King George, the architect of this, but there's so many King George. And he said, well, where did we put the Georgia Guidestones? I said, that was in book 3 in the series. And he said, what chapter did I have you move it to? Because I had it in 6, because that means the number of man, which is the number of the beast. And so, and that's true. In Hebrew, 6 means beast. And so that's what SHEILA had a plan, right? And then when God had me move it to 3, it was because the first one was about the truth about the stone, remembrance of the stones. The remembrance stones are what all the tribes did to remind people of horrific things that happened on these dates. Remember, this is where the Cherokee were, and they made them leave their land and go on the Trail of Tears. They did a big stone of remembrance, group of stones. And then the second chapter is the meaning of the word stone, which is why they called them guide stones on Georgia Guidestones, not guidelines. And then the third chapter is all the depth of who put it together, how they put it, and it was just, I went to a completely different server in a completely different state and did that chapter, and then moved it to chapter 3. And that's because God said it was King George III. So when I looked him up, he said, you'll see when they took him, and that was January 29, 1820, King George III.
King George III. So the first 3, so Adams, Jefferson, and Monroe, they all passed away. They all died because of that poisoning on July 4th. Is that correct?
Yeah, they called it medicine. They had them all on this medicine. Arsenic was medicine at the time.
Yeah.
Relieve pain. I don't know, maybe it was like a morphine. I don't know that much about it. It wasn't considered a poison until many, many years later, when there was what
So
was that play?
they started the medicine on the 4th of July, or they all died on the 4th of July on the different years.
That's when they got the final dose and died on the 4th of July exactly. Jefferson and
That's
Adams,
obviously timed, isn't it? Yeah.
7/4/18, and on the 50th anniversary, and then on the 55th anniversary was Monroe. And that, so he was 1831, July 4, 7/4/1831, and the other 2 were 1826, and that's after King George III, January 29, 1820.
Hmm. King George III. So he comes to 190. Wonder if he was another person, another character a little bit later down the line. And as that synchronicities, but also King George is 98, which is independence, but it's also Romanov. And you're saying about how the Georgia in Russia and then the Georgia in America, and this whole Russia Romanov thing's been going on for a while, hasn't it? The Tartarian stuff.
And my guess would be that he was going to start turning things back around because he saw what was happening to the Native American Indians in America. All that was planned. And then when you really witness what's happening, even though they go to the Supreme Court, because you have to have a seared conscience to continue on the plan when it destroys an entire group of people.
Yeah.
So if you have a conscience about it and you start expressing your conscience, that cannot be allowed when you're going through these kinds of maneuvers. And he was okay with everything up to that point.
Okay, so when he reached that point, you feel if he was allowed to have tarried, he'd have tried to put things right.
Yes. Yes, because it's such an odd time. I don't know what January 29 means to him or it means to England. What they did with our presidents was exactly on what was supposed to be the Independence Day for America.
There's a connection there. So, well, you could do January 29th. That could be a 129. That's Judgment Day. But also the thing with Kennedy. So some will say officially that Kennedy was shot at 12:30 in Dallas, and that was 1:30 in DC. But a lot in our movement will say that it was actually on 12:29 or 1:29 DC time. So 1:29. And there's a certain type of number that once talked about that before. But there's but I wonder if if 129, it's probably pings back to that. What is it? Is it a prime? There's a certain number. He's done it before. There's a reason for 129. And January 29th is a 129 if you look at it that way. Look at this. What year in January 29th? Was it?
January 29, 1820, and 1820 would be an 11, which means war.
1820.
Because it's been said many times, there was an armistice signed December of 43 that the World War II was over. Our guys were still serving until 55. I think Normandy was in 44. And so 11/11 being Veterans Day has just been the strangest thing for me now, learning that 11 is war. And that's what the Soldier Monument goes to. It goes from history to war. The Soldier Monument in Gettysburg, the Civil War soldier with his own gun, with his own cannonballs, with his foot on broken clay pots. It's become all about assets. It's not about living in liberty and freedom. And his pillar is called war.
129. So I'm sure someone will remember in the comments on what the 129 was. There's a certain thing to it. I know the 129s that mean something to me, but there's also other meanings within, the occult for numbers. And 129 is something. I know Juan's spoken about that before. 129. That's an interesting one. So if you do, we said the year was what, 18? What was it again?
For King George was 1820.
1820. So if we look at it, if we do 18, as you know, it would be different. 1820. Yeah, it's a little bit different. 1820 comes to that comes to 180, because 18 is 73, 20 is 107, 180. Maybe it was 180. Maybe like you say, maybe he was going to try and stop it and rectify it if he was allowed to tarry. What's your thoughts on the resurrection, Sheila?
Regarding when it happened?
Yeah, well, happening, like in the future, like, people being resurrected because Christ was resurrected. What's your thoughts? What's your understanding? What do you feel about resurrection in the future for people? I believe that we're going to see loved ones come back, that they'll literally come back. And I just wonder what your thoughts, what's your hopes, what's your feeling, what's your understanding on it? What do you believe on it?
I don't believe that as humans we're going to resurrect and come back. I do feel that there are certain people who knew what was happening and had to be pulled from the system, and they've been protected. And I've witnessed a couple of them being available, but they have no interest in being where they were before or re-announcing themselves as who they were before. They didn't get a chance to have a life because they were totally taken over and controlled. But I think they've helped people. So I think that's happening. But as far as us being dead and then coming back to life. Now, once my job is done, I'm ready to go. I've been ready to go a couple of times, and I can't believe that he just, and when I went through some horrific stuff a couple of years ago, I just thought it was it. I just, and come to find out, the physicians thought it was it. My friends thought it was it. The specialists thought it was it. Nobody thought I was going to survive. And so I think that we're here temporary. I think that we're here to do what we're here to do. And then when we're done, we're done. And I just thought a couple of times already that I was done. And I'm still here. And so what's really funny about it is it's what I've experienced in those tough moments that helps me connect dots now that I've been talking about for at least a decade publicly. I just held it all myself, figuring a lot of us were coming through this. And when I started talking about it, I realized how few were realizing what I was coming through. And yet, to have experienced all the things in the court system, the medical system, the justice system, the financial system, the credit bureau system, just all these systems that have been set up to be able to connect the dots about that is why I've lived through what I've lived through. But I'm fine when I'm done, I'm done. And I really think that's the plan for me, is that when I'm done, I'm done. Um, and what we're missing, and this is when I did the devotional, because I was never going to do a devotional. I mean, I was upset with God. It took 7 years of telling him how much I wasn't going to do a devotional because everything's fluffy and everything's like really sweetsy. And it's, all this wonderful stuff's going to happen to you. And then I hear people on Facebook, sending it out and then saying, I declare this over your life. Well, I don't have power to declare it over anybody's life. I want to declare the truth of what the Father is saying, not about what man is saying. And so I just said, I'm not going to do it. Well, when we finally did it and finished it, it's not like any other devotional. And I said, this is going to have an amazing title because there's nothing that relates to this. And it's now called A Warrior's Battlefield Strategy Devotional, Countering the Tactics of the Enemy, Fear, Doubt, and Unbelief. And the days are just 1 through 7 repeatedly for more than 52 weeks. And then he gives bonus one, so you can go back and compare where you were in the 17th week as to where you are now. You start at any time. It's not the other kingdom's days of the month. It's not the other kingdom's days of the week. So the titles of the month, the titles of the days are not in there. It's just 1 through 7, 1 through 7, 1 through 7, 1 through 7, you know. So that's what it is. And so the beauty of this is I was finding scriptures I'd never really noticed. It's repeatedly in the scriptures, what can mere mortals do to us? Because you forget that you're eternal. So when you realize that you're eternal and you've made the decision for eternal life, you were with him, you came here, and you go back. And so your home is there, it's not here. And it was strange to me because I never learned this anywhere. So in living this, what can mere mortals do to me seemed a little bit haughty. It took me a while to really take it in. Then I found it again and again and again, because he also had me do reverential fear scriptures. There's a powerful story. David Barton has it. I'm looking at his book. Original Intent, as I think the book is in, it's on my bookshelf. Original Intent by David Barton. And he wrote this story, and I included it in one of the book series books. And what it is that it had to be a battle in like 1755, because we kept fighting battles. 1776 was just one of them, you know what I mean? A lot was accomplished, but we were still fighting in 1781. So when this chief of a tribe went to see him, it was 15 years after the battle he was in with him. And what he told all of the braves of the Native American tribe, he said, what I want you to do is take out the leadership, because when you take out the leadership, the troops will run. Now, does that not talk to us about the difference between a republic and a controlled monarchy? It's the same thing. You take out the leadership, and then people are like, well, what am I going to do? Who am I going to fight with? Where am I going to go? And so that's what he said. And he said, what was astounding to him, his rifle never misses, and he knew he shot him 17 times, and not once did it affect George Washington. And he wasn't the general at the time. He was one of the leaders, maybe a corporal or whatever, but he was not a general. And he said, when this happened, I told my men to stop and we went home because you were operating under reverential fear of the Lord, and was explaining that gives you divine protection. Another confirmation that the Native American Indians know more about how to live in this world than most people do. Because I didn't know anything about reverential fear. When you have reverential fear of the Father in heaven, the only one that's living, the only one that is risen from the dead, when you have reverential fear in him, then you are standing with him and you're protected. And so divine protection, 17 shots, just even from the chief to Washington, and not one affected him. Imagine what that would be like if you're in battle with someone like that. And I can actually say, looking back over my life and experiences I've had and people trying to take me out, because it's happened in other nations, not just what happened during the whole thing we've been battling through. The targeting against us is so real, and yet it doesn't take us out. And what was really shocking to me is to realize that reverential fear protects us and we don't even know the battle. I was in this horrible accident in Georgia. The guy hit from behind. He was speeding through a construction area, and they had narrowed it down to one lane. He didn't notice it, and I was the one creeping along at the end of the people in the one lane, and he hit me so hard. And he had a new car, and it was dead at the scene. He couldn't even restart the car. That's how hard he hit me. Didn't affect me at all. Didn't have a scratch. Didn't have had issues from the hit, but I heard the whoosh of like the angels, if that's what it was. I heard the whoosh. I was stopped. I didn't hit the car in front of me. It was a miraculous thing, and I was watching that, and then boom, I was protected before the hit. And I've learned so much on that. And when did that devotional come out? 1 week before the lockdown in 2020.
Mm.
I didn't know there was going to be a lockdown. None of us knew there was going to be a lockdown in America. And it came out 1 week before the lockdown. So I have a different feeling on this because of what I've lived. Now, if I hadn't lived through these things, I'd probably go, wouldn't it be neat to be resurrected and come back and, go through this? But people are brought back from the dead if it's part of God's plan, but it's done in a short time frame. It's not 3 days later. It's not 30 days later. It's not that kind of thing. And I have witnessed that. I have witnessed that. There's a pastor's wife, and I think the pastor's last name was Young, and it was in Africa. You can look this up on the internet. The pastor who was embalmed by a funeral home, and the wife took the casket and went to a Reinhard Bonnke meeting, and it was in a church, and they wouldn't let him in the church because there wasn't even standing room because it was Reinhard Bonnke. So they took the casket down into the basement, set it on a table, opened it up, and just kept praying that he would come back. And he had been embalmed, which means all his blood was out of him, and he came back to life. And he has shared testimonies for a long time. He could still be alive. Reinhard Bonnke is not, but the man could still be alive. And Reinhard Bonnke upstairs didn't even know what was happening downstairs. They had to tell him later. So I've seen that. But the resurrection as Christ, the difference for us, okay, God, the difference for us is we have that power when Christ is in your heart. So when Christ is in your heart, you have resurrection power. And God had me look this up in a book. Sometime when we have time, I can share a testimony of Nancy Haney from Alaska. She had had a stroke and completely debilitated, but on the third day, God raised her up. And they told her it was going to be months of restoration, months of rehab. Have to learn to eat again, speak again, walk again, get your strength back. I mean, all of these layers, it was going to take many, many months. And on the third day, it was like paddles hit her, like the heart paddles that they use, and it hit her, and she's up off the bed, and she goes, "What just happened?" And she heard her voice, because all she could do is drool before that. She couldn't speak, she couldn't feed herself, nothing. God said, go to Niagara Falls. So when I put it in my book, I said he sent her to Niagara Falls. He asked her what she saw. She kept saying water, a river. Now there's a lot of water, and I think it's a river again. And God said, no. And through her, he said, power. So in Niagara Falls, you hear it. I mean, it's thundering power. And so when I put it in the book, God said, well, you have to tell the people how much power there is in resurrection power. And I think this will answer the question, Tom, which is why I'm headed this direction, is that in that power, he had me look it up. And the power on the America side alone, not Canada, just America side alone, takes care of 3.8 million homes. And God said to Nancy, now that you know, and it said to me, now that you know the amount that it takes, I want you to tell my people because my people are not tapping into it. What he told Nancy was, my people don't even understand they have resurrection power. So we have the resurrection power, but being resurrected from the dead because God is not dead. So he went through the process of the body itself dying, but he resurrected. But I don't know that we would. I personally, this is just my opinion. I believe that's not going to happen to me. But can you imagine how much we could accomplish if we realized that what's in us takes that power, takes care of 3.8 million homes, utilities, 3.8 million homes. We don't even operate like it takes care of one. So that's to me what the resurrection power is. And we do have it because Christ resides in our hearts. So that's the difference to me. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I got your perspective. It's interesting. Thank you. Yeah, very clear. Yeah, resurrection. I've got some interesting numbers. When you said as well about power, so power is 77. Hertz is 77. You measure the frequency with hertz, but the word Christ is also 77. So there's a nice correlation there. And something I've noticed is we've got November 5th. I think it's going to be more than biblical somehow. I don't know exactly what's coming, but I think it's going to be, I think it's a major line in the sand, a major crossroads. It's something bigger than election, I think. But 11.5 is positive, 11.5 is intelligence. It's art of the deal, 11.5, November 5th. But then you've got the election. Election's 83. Election's 83, faithful, but it's also negative. And even just from a scientific point of view, if you do positive 11.5, 115, plus negative 83, election, add them together comes to 198, comes to President Trump, and it comes to the resurrection. And I remember something he said in lockdown in 2020. It was POTUS, I think it was, but President Trump was in a TV studio and he was talking to a woman, an Hispanic American woman, and she was crying and she was talking about how her mother had died because of because of the sickness. And he's consoling her and he's listening and he's saying, so she died of this? Yes, she's died. And he said, well, what? And then he said, and he did the classic Trump, and he just spoke in front of the TV audience and the woman in the studio and everyone else. And he said, well, what we'll do is we'll do this and we can do this and we can put this in her and then she'll be well again. And she had just declared on national television to POTUS that her mother had died because of what she'd contracted. And he acknowledged that, he understood that. And then he said, well, what we'll do is we can do this. And in my opinion, he was describing a form of a resurrection. He was saying we can bring her back to life. And I think most of the people watching the TV just missed what he'd said, but he'd said it as clear as day. It's somewhere on YouTube. And I don't even know if the dear lady herself realized what he'd said, but he understood and acknowledged that the woman's mother had died because of, the events of spring 2020. And then he said, well, we'll do X, Y, Z to her, and then she'd be well again. I took that as a marker on resurrection. So But anyway, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I do believe as well, we were with God. We came here for whatever reason, and we'll go back again. So I concur with that as well. So amazing. Thank you, Sheila. God bless you as always. It's been wonderful to discourse with you. How can people find you? We'll put your links again below for you, but how can people find you?
Hisbest.org. And the web designer, the fourth one, who's taken up 3 years, is so close to going to functionality. We should be there within days, and it's just an exciting time. But hisbest.org, and it's always good to be talking with you, Tom, because it's such a miraculous thing that he brought all of these unique talents that people don't even understand, and they think, well, they're not like me. Guys, he needs everybody. He sent all of these amazing people to prepare people in these exact days, and he loves us so much. Never in the entire history of the world has it been as these days are for us right now, and we get to witness it and participate in it. It's pretty awesome.
It is. It's amazing. And you said there the fourth one about the web designer. Fourth is 88 Trump. 1 is 34 DJT Grace Leap. We're in a leap year. And if you do the fourth, that's 121, which is Revelation, second coming. But the fourth one is 155, which comes to the millennium, 1,000 years of peace. So I believe that's where we're going. So even when you're talking about web designers, Sheila, you're speaking the word. You're speaking the word.
Yep. Because I'm with you, Tom. When 2 or more come together, look what happens.
That's it. Here am I. That's it. That's what happens.
Yes.
Thanks, Sheila. God bless you.
Awesome. And bless you.
Take care. Speak again. Thanks, Sheila. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.